All right, everyone, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's the top of the hour. Welcome to our webinar today presented by Safe Routes Partnership. We're talking about safe routes for older adults, walking, cycling, and transit. My name is Corey Johnson. I'm the Program Support Manager at Safe Routes Partnership. I'm here to kick us off today with a few little housekeeping items. So before we get started, for those of you who aren't familiar with Safe Routes Partnership, we are a national organization whose mission is to advance safe walking and rolling to and from schools and everyday life, improving the health and well-being of people of all races, income levels, and abilities, and building healthy, thriving communities for everyone. Just to get you all familiarized with our platform today, here at GoToWebinar, on the right side of your screen, you should see your control panel. You have a few options for joining us today, either through phone or through your computer audio. You're also able to ask questions, so we look for you to share some questions or thoughts with us. We will have time at the end for Q&A, and all of our attendees are on mute right now. And we'll also be recording today's webinar. It will be available on our website along with the presentation slides probably later on this week. So check out for a follow-up email from Matt for that, along with a survey about today's webinar. So we want to get started by doing a few quick audience polls just to get a sense of who's in the room, what people are doing, where you're joining us, from. So our first question is, what is your age group? We're talking about older adults today, and it's nice to get a sense of, who's here and what ages you all are. And I'll give people about 30 seconds to respond. It was about 82% of people who voted. All right, get your last minute responses in. So it looks like we have almost everybody in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. Those of you who missed it, feel free to jump on the next one. So it looks like we have about 30% ages 23 to 35, 28% ages 36 to 50, 31% 50 to 64, 2% under 22, and 9% 65 and older. Next question. Now we want you to share, what is your mental age group? So same age ranges, but where do you think you fall for your mental age group? So again, take about 30 seconds to get your responses in. You see a lot of people in that 36 to 50 range. Take 20 more seconds. All right, I'm going to close this poll in 10 seconds. Those of you who want to jump in, go ahead and share that now. And we'll go ahead and close this poll. So 2% under 22, 35% with 23 to 35 mental age range, 46%, so almost half of you are in that 36 to 50 mental age group, 14% 50 to 64, and then 3% 65 plus. And our last poll for today is, what type of work do you do? So public health professional, transportation professional, are you an advocate, an elected official or appointed official, or do you practice some other type of work? So go ahead and add in your responses, take about 30 seconds. And again, this was really helpful for us to know who's on the call today. So thanks for participating. All right, take about 10 more seconds if you haven't voted or responded. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this one out. So it looks like a majority of our participants are transportation professionals. We also have some public health people on, a few advocates on, a few elected officials or appointed officials, and then we also have a group of people who do other work. So we really appreciate all of you being here today. Thank you for participating in our polls. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers for today. So we're going to be starting out with Vandana Shrestha, who's the Director of Community Engagement at AARP Oregon, who'll be talking about walking, followed by Carol Kachadorian, who's the Transportation Planner and founding collaborator of Double-Tilled Collaborative, and Katie White will round us out. Katie is the Director of Age-Friendly Communities for Columbus and Franklin County at the Ohio State University College of Social Work. I'm going to go ahead and hand things off to Vandana, and she will get us started.
Thank you so much. My name is Vandana. I'm the Director of Community Engagement for AARP Oregon folks. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I have to say, listening to you and the questions, I liked most the poll about mental age, and I was wondering what age I was. This year I turned 50, so I'm like a full-fledged AARP member, but I don't know about the mental age, even though, you know, sometimes I think we remain a certain age, and that was a great question. So I'm going to be talking about walking today. Those of you who don't know much about AARP, AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit. We're a nonpartisan organization, and we have members all around the country, about 36 million members. And here in Oregon, we have about 510,000 members. Our mission is to help people have choice as they age and to empower them. And toward that goal, we work a great deal on a great many issues in public policy, community education, and community service at the national, state, and local levels. And an important part of our work is around age-friendly and livable communities, and of course, transportation is part of that. So let me see if I can go to my next slide. There we go. I want to start out with some background and just give some context for our conversation today. We all probably know that America is aging, and here's a slide in front of you that shows a gap of 15 years and the kind of demographic shift that we can expect in the United States. The darker, if you look at the slide there on the right-hand side, on 2030, the darker blue states are where there are between 25 to 27% percentage of the population are 65 and over. But the fact is that for many communities and many states, this demographic shift is already happening. Right here in Oregon, we have counties that are already, you know, at 25 to 30% people 65 and over. And going a little bit deeper, here's another slide that shows that by 2035, there'll be more people ages 65 plus than children under 18. And our median age will also have changed significantly from 38 today to about 43 in 2060. Another insight into the demographic shift is that, of course, we are becoming ethnically and racially more diverse. You know, by 2050, we can expect that 45% of the old population will be non-white compared to about 26. Oops, I'm not sure. And this is all happening in the context of, you know, what people want in terms of thinking about their aging and their aspirations for continuing to remain at home and in community. This slide shows a result of the latest AARP Home and Community Survey, where we surveyed people 18 and over, and this particular slide talks about how people 50 and over show that they 80% want to remain at home and age in place, and that's largely because people have made their social networks there, they have community, and the question that is raised for all of us is, what kind of community do we need to enable people to really meet this sort of aspiration that folks have? What do we need to do to make sure that our communities are places where people of all ages, abilities, races, and backgrounds can thrive? At AARP, we use the age-friendly framework to help communities work towards their livability goals. And what do we mean by livable communities or age-friendly communities? It can simply be, if you just, a simple statement would be that it's a great place for people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds. This term age-friendly communities comes from the World Health Organization, and the WHO describes age-friendly communities as a place that is inclusive and accessible and promotes active aging. It emphasizes enablement and not disablement, and it's friendly for all ages. And as you see on the screen, the model identifies 8 domains of livability. Some of them are built environment, and the others are social economic environment. So in the built environment, communities that have great outdoor spaces, ample, affordable, accessible, diverse housing options, and then transportation and mobility options are really important to helping people thrive. And of course, we're focusing on transportation today. Regardless of where we live, we all, I think, can appreciate that we need mobility options. And it becomes even more important as we grow older. In terms of thinking about the continuum of transportation and mobility options, the 5 kind of options that are laid out there on your screen are the main options that we can say that this is how people get around in community. From walking and biking, which is the fundamental, the first building block of transportation for us, from the time we start walking or crawling around, to the personal vehicle, which is actually, the way that most Americans get around. More and more, they're market-based on-demand options, whether we're talking about TNCs or car share or other innovations that are taking place in the marketplace. And then there's the fixed route transit and traditional public transportation options. And finally, there's the ADA and community paratransit options that are mandated by the Americans with Disabilities Act for folks who may not be able to use fixed route buses or trains. And today I'm focusing on walking. Walking is, as I said, the fundamental way how we explore our world, how we first start to meet our people outside ourselves, I guess, in that sense. And if we are thinking about how do we create communities where people have great options and can thrive, walking is fundamental. And it takes a great deal of intentional work, because there are a whole lot of current situations which are not really conducive to walking, especially for older adults. Here is a slide from the Joint Center for Housing Studies from Harvard, which shows that most older adults live in suburban communities, which we, as we know, are largely designed for automobile transportation travels. And we also know that research shows that when people don't have their own cars, or they don't live near transit, they're risk being isolated. And isolation is a major threat. It's considered an epidemic. People talk about how isolation is worse than smoking. As currently things stand, people who have greater transportation options do better. People who don't drive have significantly lower levels of outside interactions. And people, and 50% report that older adults report that they could not continue to live in their current neighborhood if they could no longer drive. And I already mentioned there that, most people, older adults, get around by personal vehicle most of the time right now, but the prospect is sort of not very good for older adults because generally we outlive our driving years by around 9 years. But the great news is that walking figures, pretty high up there in terms of transportation. About 75% of non-vehicular transportation right now for the 50 and older population is by walking. And according to the League of American Bicyclists, walking trips for people ages 65 and older went up from 9 to 14% between 2009 and 2017. But the issue is that, walking around in our communities, especially for older adults, is really dangerous. Across the country, on average, older adult pedestrians are, 2 to 3 times more likely to have pedestrian fatalities in our streets. Right here in Oregon, that figure is more like 4 times, and that's compared to any other age group. We really need to think about how do we create those safe routes where people can get around on foot more safely. So what drives this trend, you might ask? First is, there are 2 factors, I would say. The first is that, as we grow older, we're more susceptible to injury and risk of death when collisions occur. And then secondly, which is something that we can actually do something about, is the transportation infrastructure that we currently have is designed not with the pedestrian in mind or other human power transportation. It's designed largely for cars and for speed. It encourages driving behavior that does not prioritize vulnerable users. We face issues of sidewalks, not having enough sidewalks in our communities, crosswalks, dangerous intersections, and a whole lot of other stuff. And I know we have a lot of transportation planners and practitioners here today, and I am sure you know a lot more about that than I do. AARP's network of age-friendly communities is a network that has communities that are committed to working intentionally on becoming more livable for people of all ages and abilities. And hundreds of communities have put walking and pedestrian safety as one of the priorities in their plans. Each community is, they are required to do an assessment and create an action plan, and 71% want to develop individuals' transportation and knowledge and skills, including awareness of non-driving options for mobility. So this is an important issue. People have already recognized this as such, but so what kind of tools do we have? At AARP, we've developed this tool called the Walk Audit tool, which a lot of organizations have, but this is specifically designed especially with the older adult users in mind. And it's a great tool I hope that you will consider using in your work. We here at AARP Oregon have used it in a variety of ways in different communities across the state. And it's a really great tool that you can download and use yourself. So you might ask, why use Walk Audit as a tool to start working towards more walkable communities? Well, first and foremost, it's a great way to engage people in the community, engage broader stakeholders, and also engage people of different ages and backgrounds so that we can create a broader understanding of why we need walkable communities. The tool has both the actual audit instrument, but also a planning guide that leaders can use. I'm going to skip through some of these. And then finally, after you've done the audit, the great thing is that it's not just an exercise, but really a tool that you can use to advance walkability by sharing the data with not only city planners, but also new partners and elected officials, and really use the data that you capture to advocate for complete streets and Vision Zero policies, which really can be great policies to make sure that people of all ages can get around in their communities. We also have just modified the toolkit so that it doesn't have to be just used by organizations, but can actually be used by individuals. So there are worksheets. So I encourage you to also take a look at this and download these worksheets and use it in your everyday walks. So that's my time with you here today. I'll be around for Q&A, but please do go out and check out the AARP Livable Communities portal. There are great tools, including the walk audit that I talked about and other age-friendly resources there. Thank you.
Hi there, it's Carol Kentadorian. I want to make sure that you can see my slides.
Yes, we can see them.
Great, great. Shall I get started?
Yep, go right ahead.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Vandana. It was interesting when you showed the slide of the 8 domains of livability. I was thinking of the ones that relate to cycling, and in addition to transportation, outdoor space and public buildings, as well as social participation and as well as civic participation. So keep that in mind as we go through my slides. I'm very pleased to be here today to talk with you about the 50 Plus Cycling Survey and what we've learned from it to create bikeable areas and supporting programs for older adults. I'm Carol Kentadorian. I am the founder and the chief practitioner with Double Tilt Collaborative. And I'm very pleased to be here today. Before we get started, I want to show you this quote from a review that Ann Powers at NPR did of new albums being released by Bob Dylan, who turns 80, and Willie Nelson, who is 87. And this is really related to the question about your mental age versus your chronological age. There are a number of things I could share with you from her review, but this is the one I think is the most poignant. What we think of as old age has become more active and a more active and engaged phase of life, and that we, as we age, are doing the same thing as many of our listeners or people who are younger. And that's why remaining physically active is so important. So I'm pleased to say I partnered with AARP for year 3 of the 50 Plus Cycling Survey. And you can see the time period that the survey was open. Here's the article that AARP published on September 15th. If you're interested in seeing the article, you can either capture this QR code or quickly go to this bit.ly link and see it. And the survey asked people about their cycling history, habits, and preferences. There was a visual preference survey of facilities that people could say they would or they would not use. And there was an online journal option. We had about 400 people that completed 2 online journal entries. So and I'm going to share some of those with you today. So who answered the survey? Well, our goal was to get responses from all 50 states, and we did. We got at least 2 responses from all 50 states. You can see the states where we got more than 100 responses and the states where we also had very strong responses in the 50 to 75 range. I'm sad to say that we had a number of states where we didn't have very many responses, and I would ask that if you are from one of these states that have the thumbs down and want to work with me to try to get more responses, please be in touch, and I'd be happy to do that. We're going to have another round of the survey next year, so hopefully we can get more responses all the way around. About 3,000 women and men ages 50 to 85 responded to the survey. This is the distribution by gender and by age. And I will say the 2 photos here are photos that people sent that completed the online journal. We did have a pretty strong representation from the 60 to 75 range, but we also had a number of people that were older and very physically active, above 80 and above, that answered the survey. We asked people if they cycled regularly, and we let them determine what that was. And the rate was pretty strong, higher with men than women. But of the people that say they cycle regularly, it's anywhere from 1 to 5 times per week. Now that rate was very strong in the 50 to 55 range at 95%. It did decline with age to about 75% in the 81 to 85 range. And although 75% is still pretty strong, but then it went back up again for the 85 and older group that said they cycled. 92% of them said they cycle regularly. We asked about what type of trip, what the trip purpose was and how far they went. And I'm just going to show this to you briefly. This is what the answers look like, but I'm going to share with you the squares that were highlighted in dark green. Now, there were many people that are cycling for social reasons and for companionship. And when you think of the 8 domains of livability and the impact of isolation, this is on someone, this is really important. You can see the mileage here. Either people did about under 10 miles, which could be about an hour, or they did over 15, which might be a couple of hours. The 11 to 15 range tended to be not the most popular range selected. This is one of my favorite photos that I got from the online journal of some men that cycled together, and they obviously were cycling in the past couple of months. We had about 19% that were cycling to and from work up to 10 miles. So these are people probably under 65 who are continuing to work. And that's important to remember that there are a lot of older adults that continue to work and many cycle to work. About a third cycle 2 to 10 miles for daily errands. And then we had a number of people that are cycling for exercise. Again, you can see that it's either under 10 or over 15. That 11 to 15 range is not quite as popular. We asked people if the amount of cycling they're doing in the past year had changed. 52% said they were cycling more. 18% are cycling less. Of that 52% that are cycling more, the vast majority, the largest response we got, and people could give us more than one reason, but 70% said it was due to COVID-19, the need to get out, to be in the fresh air, to get more exercise. And the next highest responses were 8%, someone to ride with, and a good on-road facilities and trails. Now, you're going to hear this consistently throughout the responses, that desire for companionship and the desire for good facilities was throughout the survey, and you'll hear that over and over again. Of the 18% that cycle less, the highest percent of concern was for less safe roads and some physical condition that caused them to be cycling less. The rest of them had family responsibilities, loss of someone to cycle with, and other changes in their life. Now, e-bike sales are going up, and I think there's a common belief that older adults just need to get an e-bike and they'll be good to go. But we discovered that that was not the case among those people that answered the survey. In fact, the rates of ownership really didn't start to go up until people turned 76. You can see on the right here that women and men had e-bike ownership rates of about the same. Now, these are percentages of people by age group that responded, and I'm just going to overlay that curve of the number of people that responded. So you can see that the e-bike ownership rate does increase with age, but there are a number of older adults that don't have e-bikes and frankly are not interested today in purchasing them. We also asked people to tell us what type of cyclists they felt they were, and we used the 4 types of cyclists that we've been using for the past, those of us in this business have been using for the past few years. But we didn't offer no way, no how, because this survey was only for people that cycle. Instead, we added a depends upon the circumstances category, which turned out to be a pretty popular one. Of those that responded, over half were strong and fearless, and then 20% are enthused and confident, and 22% say it depends on the circumstances. So given this, the question is, there's a lot more data in the survey response, and you can read the article to get even more information. But the question is, what's needed to ensure bikeability, and that supportive programs are there? Well, I took a look at the answers to the questions of why older adults would stop cycling. And many, many people that responded to the survey throughout the age groups that responded said that they cannot envision a time when they would stop riding. I want to take a pause here and thank Peggy Lott, who I took this photo of about 2 months ago. She died about 6 weeks ago, and I learned of her death. And learned that she started cycling after she had a stroke about 3 years ago, and she cycled every day. So that was part of her stroke recovery. And I'm going to miss seeing her cycling around Oxford, Maryland. So she's one of those people that would not stop riding. Another reason why older adults would stop riding, the next highest reason, or the highest reason, was for health reasons. They also said they would stop cycling if they moved someplace where it was not safe to cycle, or there was no one to ride with. So we're back to this theme of good facilities and someone to ride with. One of the questions we asked had a list of characteristics of where they cycle, and we asked them which things were important to them when they cycle. So again, you see someone to ride with, bikeable destinations, pleasant views, benches, bathrooms, water. Those are kind of the supporting things. In terms of infrastructure, what was important is an overall feeling of safety, roads in good condition and clear of debris, fewer points of conflict, and that's achieved with enough space for all users, protected bike lanes, and trails. I have to say this group of people that responded to the survey are real fans of trails. Now, for those 800 online journals that we received, I know this is a really busy chart, and we asked people which facilities they rode on and how safe and comfortable they would rate them. So this is a summary of what they said. Not everybody that completed an online journal rode in all of these facilities, but you can see that these darkest brown are the ones that they said were the most safe and comfortable. Trail, separated bike lane, and bike lane. We did chat in the chat a link to a page on the Doublefield Collaborative website that has this chart that you can download. It also has another chart showing some of the responses for people that's age-based, because I was wondering if as people age, they found even a trail next to a road to be less safe and comfortable. So you can see what that looks like, as well as some of the other comments that they provided in the online journal. So I would encourage you to go to that link and download that. So as I said, there is a consistent theme, the need for an overall feeling of safety and for companionship. So what do? Well, we really need to have responsive infrastructure and programs, beginning with effective maintenance programs, make sure that the bikeways and the trails don't have debris, don't have broken glass. Continue to put in new infrastructure or update the infrastructure that's there. Make sure there are continuous pathways. We got comments from people that said, all of a sudden the bike lane is gone or the shared lane marking is gone. What am I supposed to do? There also needs to be a lot of agency coordination. I know we have a high percentage of transportation professionals here, but talk with your partners in the health profession, talk with your advocate professionals, talk with your elected officials, and really to get these facilities installed and to get the programs up and running. To be responsive, part of it is you need to know where older adults live and what the existing bike network is, and then do an outreach and engagement that is designed for them and is with them. You're welcome. I'm happy to send you the template to this type of cyclist. I took all of these photos. I talked with people in my community when I saw them and took their photo and had an understanding of kind of where they fell on the spectrum. So you can create something like this in your community outreach and engagement, and it really helps to bind, to create that relationship of trust with the community. In terms of programs, really support cycling groups such as the Cycle to Health program that Howard County has in their Office of Aging and Wellness. Have learned how to cycle or refresher skills courses. This photo and a couple of others in here are ones from a Cycling Past 50 workshop I did at a senior center in Northern Virginia. Help older adults get bicycles if they can't afford them. There is a bike share company that does specialize in retirement communities or 55 plus communities, and be open to having these programs either on site or on the road or on trails, wherever it works and people feel safe. Now, Vandana also talked about walk audits and community conversations. I'm really a proponent of having community conversations among different modes to talk about what works, what scares people, understand how people who are driving perceive people who are walking perceive people who are biking, and so forth. And so I have created this community conversations on Transportation Guide. There's an agenda, there are participant materials. It can be about an hour. It can be held at neighborhood association meetings, at PTAs, at senior centers. If you want something more formal, AARP's roadmap to livability is also linked on this, so consider that as well. Now, we tend to think that anybody over the age of 50 or 65 is the same, but we do know that there are age-based differences, and we do know that there are residential context differences. So I'm going to really quickly run through a table that is also included in the downloadable that you can take a closer look at. And this table assumes that there's different engagement depending upon the ages and the residential context. I think there are 4 basic residential contexts for older adults. They live independently. They live in some kind of independent context that's institutional, like a shared living community. They live in assisted living, or they're in memory or nursing care. I did some research on the ages, and you can see the typical ages for older adults within each of these communities. So if we take a look at that, this is what my guess is, and my research tells me that people are inclined to be cycling or not cycling, or where the opportunities may be. And this is what the network should look like, or you can move towards with each of these facilities, each of these types of residential context. Again, this is in the downloadable. I encourage you to download that document and take a closer look at that and think about what that means for the work that you do. So that's it for me. My consistent theme has been think about who the older adults are, how they remain active, how they could become more active through cycling, and what we can do to encourage and support cycling. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Katie White. I'm the Director of Age Friendly Columbus and Franklin County, a program of Ohio State University's College of Social Work. I'm here today to speak a little bit about transit ridership and older adults. And I want to start off just by saying that we need to establish that our goal here in keeping older adults independent and mobility resilient is to encourage and support individuals that want to and are able to do so safely to continue driving as long as possible, and then to also encourage these other modes for mobility and transportation. And much to Bandana's point earlier around the continuum of transportation, I really liked that visual where she had the lines going through each part of the continuum. My only thought as I continue learning in this space is that we should also draw lines between the various modes as well. So it's not like we're giving up one mode to move on to the next, but if we're doing this correctly, we should be encouraging modes, multiple modes throughout the lifetime, so that maybe you want to be car light for a little bit and you're walking and biking and using transit, but you can still kind of fall back on that car if you need to. So just sort of a thought in addition to what she mentioned earlier. So the goal of my presentation today is to talk a little bit about the growing need for transit as a mobility option for older adults, discuss creating inclusive and accessible planning environments, and to just share briefly about some programs that we're doing in Central Ohio. So I wanted to start by talking about some of the preferred transit modes for older adults. So for me, it's always nice to have actual examples of different communities. And you'll see on the left-hand side, nearly 7,000 respondents to a survey that was done across multiple communities. This was in 2016. And the first box with the car on top, we see that those 65 to 74 responded that they usually get around by using public transportation. About 9% of respondents said public transportation. As we move into the older age group, the 75 to 84, we see that this decreases to 7%. And so to further illustrate this decrease in usage of public transportation as individuals age, I want to show you the results from the survey that we did in Columbus. So the third choice over, I take a COTA bus. COTA is our local transit authority, Central Ohio Transit Authority. And what you see is from left to right, the ages increasing. So 12.8% of respondents ages 50 to 59 said that they take the bus. It decreases down to just under 6% for those 60 to 74. And then for those 75 and older, decreases all the way down to less than 1% of individuals saying that's how they usually get around. So when we start to think about the fact that we have different modes and different choices, specifically talking about Columbus, Ohio, but as adults age, they aren't utilizing that mode as much. There's really room for digging in and listening in the community to see what's going on there, and to work with our elders in the community and planners and elected officials to figure out what are some ways that we can decrease these different fears and apprehension around riding the bus in order to make sure we can grow our membership. And what we found in our survey is it's really less about interest, as it's more about just not being familiar or a perception that the bus or local transit might not be meeting their needs. So when you start to look at sort of this growing body of research around different key attributes to increasing transit as an option for older adults, there are these 5 attributes that the Beverly Foundation and others have been researching. So accessible, can I get to it and can I use it? And I'll talk more about some examples in a moment here. Is it affordable? How much does it cost? How do I get the pass? Are there discounts if you're older? Is it acceptable? So will these services meet my personal needs? Is there a place to sit while I'm waiting for the bus? Is the bus clean? Is there a friendly driver if I need to have the bus dip down for me to get on? Is it available and does it go to where I want it to, when I want it to? And is it adaptable? So if I do have some special needs, a mobility device or something like that, will the bus be able to adapt and respond to my needs? So here's where I'm going to shift a little bit into some of the strategies and work that we're doing in Central Ohio. So I really want to raise awareness of the fact that ODOT, our Ohio Department of Transportation, has added an older road users piece to their strategic highway safety plan. And I'm not sure how many states are doing this, but I know it's not every state. And so I'm really proud to work on this statewide panel along with our statewide committee, along with individuals from across the state. This is just one piece of the plan, and I know it's too small. I'm not expecting you to read it, but I wanted to show you that we have really great depth and breadth of strategies that we're working on, one of which is around these active or alternative transportation modes. And this is coming from a place of the fact that our mature driver-related fatalities and serious injuries continue to increase over the years. And so this is our statewide approach at decreasing those injuries and fatalities. Again, I want to make sure that I relate back to those accessibility and availability, those 5 key attributes, and share the specifics that we heard from our community. So in age-friendly communities, as Bandana mentioned earlier, we really are utilizing community-based participatory methods, and that is bringing older adults, people with disabilities, individuals with English as an emerging language, bringing folks together to say, what are the barriers to riding fixed route? And by understanding and hearing those barriers and doing walk audits, then we can turn those into potential facilitators for increasing their usage. So I want to just run through a couple of the things. Some of these are funded through our SHSP work with our DOT. Some of them are locally funded through foundations. It's really kind of a hodgepodge. We're pretty scrappy when it comes to funding our strategies. And so if there's questions later about that, I can discuss it in more detail. But we're looking at increasing travel training as we hear that individuals are nervous about knowing where to buy a bus pass, how do I read the map, things of that nature. We know that we need to increase our travel training. And specifically, we will be piloting a program where we're training the trainer in a peer approach where older adults will become travel training ambassadors and take out other groups of older adults to help them become more comfortable in riding transit. We'll also be looking at decreasing barriers to obtaining our discounted passes. So yes, we do offer discounted passes in Central Ohio. However, you must go downtown to pick up that pass, and that can be a barrier in and of itself. So we'll be looking at different areas, some anchor institutions in the community where we can set up shop and allow individuals to come in and obtain those discounted passes. We'll also be increasing the visibility of target populations through some positive marketing campaigns. So really, some of the decreasing of apprehension around riding the bus starts with just kind of being able to feel like you can see yourself riding the bus, and that you know, the bus is for everybody. So looking at taking photographs of local residents, which we've been doing. If you're unable to take photographs of local residents, the National Aging and Disability Transportation Network Center has a free library of photos you can use. But really thinking about on our bus stops, on our buses, potentially on different signage, having those photos and positive messaging around riding the bus. In order to increase the accessibility, we'll be translating materials, we'll be making sure that they're in larger font, potentially in Braille, looking at the maps, the outreach material. So again, you need to be able to see yourself on the bus. You also need to feel like you can fully and confidently ride the bus and understand all of the materials related. And last but certainly not least, especially when it comes to how much these things cost, we need to really increase our transit supportive infrastructure in targeted areas. And so on my next slide, I'll go over a little bit about how we learned some of the specifics. So to Carol's point and to Bandana's point, it's really about those safe sidewalks, the crosswalks, and specifically transit related. We know that individuals loud and clear are telling us that they want shelters, they want benches, they prefer that they're well lit, and that they're in areas where they either live or want to go to. So those destinations and origins are accessible. Along the right-hand side, some of the target demographics that we're looking at in order to do these targeted strategies to reach more universal equity. We're looking at age, we're looking at disability, race, income, language. Of course, we're taking into account our high injury networks. Our community just started a Vision Zero initiative, so that's been really wonderful to sort of join forces around these common ideas. And on the left-hand side, an outline of just one of our focus groups in 2019. Our biggest focus group was with a group of immigrants and refugees in the community. We held them in 6 different languages. And again, it was specifically about What are the barriers and facilitators for riding transportation in our community? And we held other focus groups across the year, ended up speaking with a little over 100 older adults and individuals with disabilities about these specifics too. So the previous slide that outlined these different strategies or facilitators to transportation came directly from those focus groups in 2019. Now, what happened just as we're about to launch our strategies? As I would imagine everyone on this call can attest to, COVID really put a pause on a lot of our mobility work. And so I worked with a colleague at the DOT to bring just a little bit of some data to raise awareness around this drastic change in transit ridership. So this chart is outlining transit ridership in Ohio, not just rural, but some urban agencies too. And the decrease in ridership ranges from, a decrease from 45% all the way up to some agencies just shutting down. And so we need to start thinking about, not just response, which is what we originally were doing in our community, but what does recovery look like? And how do we sort of utilize this really challenging time to come up with some great strategies for making transit more accessible for everyone? I also want to just draw attention to this really wonderful resource. Many planners on the call probably already know about this, but the transit app online actually has a huge database that outlines different COVID-related changes in demand, resources, articles, so a really, really great place for folks to go. You can put in your community and look at real-time transit usage. So finally, I just want to make sure that those on the call know about a couple of key resources, places that we continually go to seek articles, to seek training and education. I mentioned the NADTC earlier. They have incredible trainings, resources. The quote I mentioned earlier around targeted approaches to equitable solutions, that came from a training that I sat in on that. Bandana obviously outlined many of the important resources from AARP Livable Communities website. If you're not familiar, you can go in and find your own community and look at the surveys that they've done related to walking, biking, or transit. Of course, the National Transit Institute, they have a specific training around increasing older adult ridership on transit. And then every community across the US is served by an area agency on aging. And so I encourage you to reach out. They're great partners. They are experts in aging, and in my experience, at least in Central Ohio, have been a plethora of knowledge and a great partner on things. So my email is there, white.3073@osu.edu if you have any questions, and thank you very much for having me on today.
Thanks so much, Katie, and thank you to all of our presenters today. I am going to go ahead and get us started with our Q&A section. Okay. All right, and we had a lot of questions come into the chat box, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in. Vandana, the first question is for you. Somebody's asking about if AARP is working with various DOTs and road safety audits, working with various DOTs on road safety audits, and if you're being firm in doing outreach with them. And I will go ahead and take you all off mute.
Thank you, Corey. That's a great, I have to say, I don't have a really good answer. I don't have that national perspective of what all the other state offices are doing. We're organized in our state-based work. We have 53 state offices, and each of the state offices work with DOTs or their local municipal transportation departments individually. But that's something that we haven't done here in Oregon, so I'm going to look into it. So I also saw another question related to results of walk audits and if they were available. Some of the ones are available online, as was mentioned before. For us here in Oregon, when we have done walk audits, a lot of them have been experiential. We have not necessarily captured all the data and presented it to, let's say the transportation department in Portland or whatever. A lot of the audits we do are, with elected officials, with people from the transportation departments, and then they just take the audits that we've collected, and we've done it that way. So more education and organizing, but other states have done it, and they're available online. And you can also reach out to state offices in around the country that you may be in your state. So
great, thanks, Vandana. And a question for Carol. We have someone who's wondering about safety statistics for senior bicycling accident rates and recovery from falls, and also another question about incorporating adult trikes into your program. And this one for Carol.
Okay, let me talk about the trikes first. We did ask people if they had a trike. About 3% said they had trikes. We showed two photos, one of a typical, what I call a big girl trike, and the other of a recumbent style trike. And most of the people, I think, had the recumbent style trikes, and then a small percentage of them were e-trikes. So there's a relatively low percent of trikes. I'm hoping that next year the rate might increase a little bit, but that's how we incorporated trikes. I know that there are, my friend Preston Tyree in Austin is really promoting trikes for shopping and errands, and he lent me a couple when I was there last October. In terms of safety statistics, I don't have safety statistics on hand, but I do have a document that shows the crash rates. And yes, crash rates are higher for people 65 and over. It would be helpful to kind of parse those out, maybe 50 to 64, 65 to 75 and older, so we can begin to understand if there are age differences. We did ask in the survey if people had near misses in the past year, and the majority, and who they had them with. The options were scooters, joggers, walkers, other cyclists, motorists, and I have not had any. The majority of near misses were with motorists, and my guess that a lot of that has to do with infrastructure design as well as behavior on the part of motorists and perhaps the cyclists. We asked if people had fallen during the past year or nearly falling during the past year. Many of them had not, but about a third of them had. And we asked them to describe what happened. And it was like distracted riding, couldn't get my foot unclipped. Somebody suddenly stopped in front of me. I hit a patch of sand. New storm grate installed this is one new storm grate installed crossing on my daily commute, and the tire got stuck in it. But I would say if you are concerned, think about what your concern is. Some older adults have balance issues, so you need to think about what would increase your balance. It could be some body training. It could be taking a course to kind of relearn how to ride in different conditions and with your current body as a matter of building confidence. It's also a matter of choosing where you ride, where you feel safest, maybe cycling with other people so that you get that confidence, and there's also the safety in numbers. In terms of the network, I would say work to get better facilities, including crossing at intersections. Do the community conversations if you can. Get your community to do a better job of maintaining. Maybe help organize some group rides. So I would say don't stop riding, but make things better for yourself and for your community to ride.
Great, thank you. And we have time for one last question. Are there any organizations who've released a guidance document around recommended design of pedestrian facilities for seniors? So is there a general understanding about walk speeds? And I guess this could be for Vandana, if you know of any organizations who offer guidance or resources around pedestrian facilities for seniors. And as you're answering, I'm going to put up the previous poll questions too, in case people were curious.
No, I think the ARP livable communities, I can't say that I can point to one immediately, but I would say check out the ARP livable communities website. It has amazing resources and tools, and there is just such a plethora of information that I can't say that definitively I would point to one document. And that's not a terribly useful answer. I apologize.
That's okay, thank you. Katie's also saying that Safe Streets for Seniors in New York City also has great resources specific to infrastructure. So that's it for today. We're going to go ahead and close out. Recording of this webinar will be available on our website along with all of the individual presentations. So please keep an eye out for that. It'll be emailed to you in a few days along with a survey. In the meantime, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. We really appreciate you all joining us today and asking such great questions. And again, thank you to all of our presenters. That was a lot of very useful information and some great resources that you all shared. So thank you to Carol and Vandana and Katie. We hope to see you all next time for another Safe Routes Partnership webinar, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.